Welcome to True Crime Rocket Science. If you haven't subscribed to the channel, please do. If you have, welcome to the channel. We do things a little bit differently here. We try to remain curious. We try to gather information and build our case almost as though we were prosecuting a case. We almost take it from a legal position. Gather evidence, build your case, put your arguments together as though you're going to prosecute a case beyond reasonable doubt. So we place quite high standards to our investigative attitude, I guess. If that is what you are interested in and you haven't subscribed, please do. If you're enjoying this video, like, share, leave a comment, and let's get started.
Police were called to the Theta Chi frat house on 1st Street just before midnight after someone at the party was stabbed several times. According to the Davis Enterprise, the victim suffered serious injuries but is expected to recover. The victim and everyone at the party refused to cooperate with the police investigation.
Hello and welcome to True Crime Rocket Science, the most authentic voice in true crime. If a killer on the loose is a challenge to find, a vehicle should be a lot easier, and yet it appears law enforcement are having some difficulty tracking it down. Why? Did the fact that there was a football game the night of the murders play a role in perhaps some kind of aggressive tribalism that was stirred up that night? The fact of the game also means there had to have been an influx of outsiders to Moscow on that particular Saturday, and one can actually look at stats and pavilion seating to get an idea of how many people from outside of town were likely in town that weekend. One obvious place for outsiders to encounter locals would have been at the corner club on game day. One reason why the locals might not recognize the vehicle or have any actionable intuitions about a potential perpetrator is maybe that there wasn't one, not from the University of Idaho anyway. We had this scenario in the Kylie Rodney case. Everyone suspected the students knew something and weren't telling, but the alternative was also that they didn't know anything. Of course, there is a third alternative, that they didn't know anything of any significance to the incident and weren't telling anyway. This secrecy within the fraternities could be the real reason why the quadruple murder investigation in Moscow, Idaho is going nowhere fast. That's certainly our perception. If we need any confirmation that a fraternity house might batten down the hatches, even where the criminal intent is blatant, even when you ask the victim, what happened? Well, we need go no further than a year ago at the same university that played the Vandals on that fateful night. Yes, Davis from California. That news clip you heard was from Davis University. It also involved a knife stabbing late at night at a party, and no one wanted to talk about it. Not the frat people and not the victim. So if we go to that article from it's from the Davis Enterprise. It's from January 4th, although it was dealing with the events of a couple of days earlier. And it's titled, Frat House Stabbing Just the Start of a Busy Weekend for Davis Police. This is a quote from that article. A stabbing investigation at a Davis fraternity house has stalled after officers encountered uncooperative witnesses, including the victim of the crime. Lieutenant Ilya Bezuglov said the clock was approaching midnight on New Year's Eve.
Police were called to the Theta Chi frat house on 1st Street just before midnight after someone at the party was stabbed several times.
The house on Theta Chi was at 515 1st Street, and the knifing actually interrupted a party that was in progress. So a little bit unlike the 1122 King Road incident, where everyone was asleep. This actually interrupted the party while it was in full swing. Now you can imagine if it happened at approaching midnight, well, that's when it was almost at the peak of the party. According to one of the officers, one of the party participants was stabbed multiple times at the house, which sent him to hospital in a critical condition. When officers tried to determine what happened, every single participant at the party refused to talk to us. As for the victim, who later improved and is expected to recover, he doesn't want to participate in any investigation either. So that is from that article, and what I think that shows is we should not underestimate how sticky the party/fraternity glue is, even when things become completely unstuck. And so you had the same situation, the police asking anyone for information, putting up a tip line, and who knows whether charges were eventually brought in that case. What is interesting is that weekend led to a lot of other arrests as well, drug possession, vehicle theft, etc. And that does make you wonder, was there a stranger among us type scenario? Did someone come from out of town and found themselves within the fabric of students and were aggravated in some way? So that's that. Now I want to share with you some news from Chief Fry dealing with some of the latest news and latest update in the Idaho case.
I'd like to give a quick update to the community. Starting Friday morning, we are going to be bringing in a professional cleaning crew to go to the residents and begin cleaning. Part of the reason we're doing that is because of the biohazards as well as chemicals that were used during the investigation. So there will be activity over at that residence on King Road, and we just want people to know about that.
Now, I think the fact that they are prepared to allow cleaning crews inside, doesn't that seem to suggest the crime scene is going to be released imminently? That may also indicate the investigation is progressing better than we feared. You can imagine there's pressure on the cops to wrap up this case before January 11, which is when classes commence, which is within the next 2 weeks. You could also imagine that the university folks, authorities, figureheads there have requested that law enforcement try and produce something, provide some result before January 11. So one wonders, are we going to see something? Another case that was pushed onto my desk occurred in Pullman, Washington, just a week prior to the murders. So there's been the thought, could the perpetrator have come from the University of California in terms of Davis, right? And so another version of that theory is, could someone have come from Pullman, Washington, right? Is the perpetrator from outside of town? Well, according to this article from US News, WSU cop accused of misconduct on duty resigns. And this was published November 4th, 2022, so barely a week before the incident. An excerpt from the article reads, quote, "A university investigation found Kurt, K-U-H-R-T, engaged in predatory grooming behavior, made explicit comments and non-consensual physical contact with co-workers, and engaged in sexual activities while on duty, according to university officials. Investigations began in March 2022, so around about 6 months before this crime in Moscow. And that is when a concerned member of the campus police force contacted university leaders. Now, the problem with this incident is that the King Road incident appears to have no explicit sexual component. And you could imagine that if that was the idea, the killer could have pulled that off, I suppose. But it's not part of the fabric of that crime at all. And it's not clear whether the Washington incident involves any students or just co-workers, or for that matter, any violence. And the reason I brought all of this information to your attention is really just to emphasize that the frat party stabbing on the Davis campus, but especially the victim refusing to lay charges. I mean, think about the victim refusing to lay charges and the survivors potentially saying less than they know. It indicates to what extent a veil of secrecy may lie over student activities. And one can only imagine what these activities are that they are so desperate to keep secret. If parents knew about them, knew what was going on, would they be allowed to continue their studies? Ditto the survivors. I mean, they are supposed to continue their studies into 2023. Now, one would want to give them the benefit of the doubt, but this is a quadruple murder investigation. The victims died terrible deaths it remains unsolved, and one's got to wonder, is there an innocent reason why we can't find the killer? Or is someone covering up for somebody else? I suppose it's also possible that the police are remaining so mum that this impression has been created that some of the obvious suspects and some of the obvious information doesn't really take you anywhere when actually it does, when actually it has. So once again, this news that the crime scene will be released, it appears that it may be released, that may be a symptom that something is brewing, that something may be announced within the next couple of days. Time will tell. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you guys next time.